Where have you been, Marco? Is a question I've been asked several times by my viewers in the last couple of weeks. It's not about where, but what I've been doing, which is I've been busy with the beginning of the academic year. I haven't been able to play many games or to film many reviews, but finally I found the time to film a video about a game that I did play recently and that I enjoyed very much. It's a game that I picked up at Django in 2015, where the game was being released. It is the new version of the Versus system. Now, I played the Versus system a couple of years ago. You can find an old video of mine for that system. And I played it when it wasn't cool to do so, because it was after the game had been released and the game wasn't all that cool anymore. People had moved on and no one was talking about a rebooting, a re-release. So I already seen the potential of that game as a game that somebody may still be interested in playing. I was very pleased to see at Gen Con that they had released the new version. Actually, I hadn't played the old one in a while, so I was curious to give the system a try again. Versus system is a card system that handles fights between groups of superheroes and supervillains, or very often between superheroes and superheroes. We know the superhero teams do clash against each other quite often, and it is set in the world of the Marvel Comics, which is a narrative, a fictional world that I enjoy very much. Let me show you how the new Versus system looks and plays. I'm not going to get into details about the differences between the old system and the new system. I'm sure you can find a lot of information online about that. You can find all the specific parallels and lists of similarities and differences. What I'm going to tell you today is simply how the new system works. This basic starting set comes with 4 teams. You have the Avengers, which is this team here. You also have the Guardians of the Galaxy. Then you have the X-Men and villains. This basic set also comes with recommendations on how to set up your starter deck, and this is what I have here. Actually, for all of the 4 teams, I have prepared and I have played the standard recommended decks, and I found that they work pretty well. It is possible, once you're familiar with the game, of course, to customize your own deck, and it is something that I'm always a little resisting about doing, simply because I'm always afraid that when you start customizing your decks, the meta game becomes more important than the game. I like the idea of making decks that are, or playing with decks that are already balanced, and where the performance throughout gameplay is more important than the preparation of the deck itself. But this is just me. If you want, of course, you can make your own decks. So you have your deck of characters, and each deck has a set of possible leaders, or better, main characters. For example, the Avengers may have Captain America or Iron Man or Spider-Man or the Hulk as their main character. There are also cards for the same characters in this deck as the regular selves. So you have, for example, Iron Man as the regular character or as the main character. Each team has one and only one main character. Suppose that in this game I'm using the Avengers deck and I want to use Iron Man as my main character. Each main character has 2 cards, level 1 and level 2. You start with the level 1 version, and you may be able during the game to replace it if you gain enough experience points to level up the character. Each character levels up and gains experience points by doing different things. It is very thematic that way. There's a standard way of gaining experience points and leveling up, and of course the extra powers and advantages that you gain when you level up also are tailored to the specific character that you're using. Everything is very thematic in this game. The main character idea is super crazy important, because you win the game simply by knocking out of the game the main character of the opponent. So even though you do have a main character, it's not like in other games where the main character is an extra entity outside of the battlefield. For all intents and purposes, the main character is a regular character that moves around, fights, performs actions. But also you need to be careful and protect the character, because if the character is out, you're out and you have lost the game. There are also some other rarer, stranger ways of winning the game. For example, when Deadpool is a main character, he has a strange ability that may allow the owning player to win the game in a different way. But usually you eliminate the main character of the opponent, you win the game. So you have your deck of cards, and there are different types of cards. There are plot twists, so they're simply your traditional cards that have a special effect, which is good, and you play it whenever the situation applies, whenever the card tells you can use it. For example, this one is for combat. You play the card and you resolve the text. Locations you can play in your resource area. You can place them face up, and they usually generate a resource for you. There are some game effects, in particular superpowers, that in order to be used require the expenditure of a resource. So for example, if I have a superpower that to be activated requires that resource, or a superpower that requires this resource, and I have this card in my play area, I can flip it face down. The card stays there, but I cannot produce a resource anymore, and I have that resource which I can use. For example, this card ability, there is a Pulsar Blast, does require that resource to be used. Flip down the card, I have the resource, spend it, I can now implement this effect. So some of the superpowers of the heroes or villains are super awesome, but they are not that easy to use. You won't be able to use them very often because there's a limit imposed by the number of resources that you may be able to acquire. So you have locations, plot twists, which are immediate actions, and then you have characters, of course, such as these ones. The characters you will play from your hand, and you will place them in front of you, forming your play area. And you will line up your characters in 2 rows. There will be a back row and a front row. If you have only one row, then it's all the same. But in most cases, you will have a back and a front. The placement of the cards within a row doesn't really matter, only the fact that they are in one of the 2 matters. Which ones they are in matters. So you have a back row and front row, and this is one of the main concepts in the game. Now in the game you also will use these markers here to keep track of things, and they are really, I don't know, they look cheap and they're pretty small and thin. A little disappointing from that point of view. The cards look nice, but component-wise I expected better markers. Markers to keep track of experience points for your main characters. Markers to keep track of wounds. When a character gets stunned by a game effect, the character is flipped face down and you place a wound marker on it. When the character have a number of wound markers equal to the number of health points, which is printed here, the character is knocked out. People tend to think of this as the character is killed, and then you may be able to bring another copy of the same character back, and I've heard players say, well, how can he come back to life? Well, first, in superhero stories, people come back to life all the time, but the point is that think of this as the character being knocked out, which may be for the rest of the game, or which may be temporarily, if you're able to bring back the character using another card for the same character. Anyways, ones that are used to keep track of the amount of health that the character has lost. And then you have these markers here, +1/+1 or +3/3. They simply indicate bonuses in attack or defense. All characters have these 2 stats, which are attack and defense. Some are good at one thing rather than the other. And if you have a +1/+1, simply means that the 2 stats are increased. Now, Black Panther has 4 and 3 instead of 3 and 2. The +1/+1 and +3/3 simply are used to make change, so that you could have +2/2 if you had the 2 of them. Then you replace them, stuff like that. There are also penalties though, so there are corresponding markers for negative effects. So you have -1, -1, -3, -3. And of course, these bonuses and penalties annul each other out. A -1, -1, if you play a +1/+1, simply means that both markers are removed and now the card is back to its original stats. But again, everything looks great in this game except for these small, disappointing, little depressing looking markers. So, back to us. At the beginning of the turn, you draw 2 cards from your deck and you add them to your hand. Then you have the recovery phase. If there are characters that are stunned from from the beginning, from your turn, from the previous turn, then you simply unstun them and you put them back face up, retaining the number of wounds that they still have. Now the character is available to be used again. When they are stunned, they cannot be used. Then you have the build phase, when you can choose a card from your hand and you can place it in your resource area. This is something that feels very counterintuitive to players at the beginning. You're simply committing a card to produce resources for you, and once it's in your resource area, you really can't do anything with it. So if I play this card and I put it in my resource area, it's locked there for the rest of the game, unless there are game effects that allow me to use it again. But this should be implicit. This is one of those games where there are so many game effects that it is implicit in everything that I say, that there is behind the idea that all I say is such, unless there's a game effect that allows you to break that rule. But usually when you place on a card in your resource area, it is committed for the rest of the game. So turn 1, I put a card down, then I have a resource. Turn 2, I decide to sacrifice another card, and I put it there. I have 2 resources, 3 resources the following turn, and maybe this is what I have. I decide to commit this one. Nice. Turn 4, I spent a resource. Every turn I have 4 resources. As I said, locations can be placed face up because they maybe then put face down to generate a specific resource. Basically, once they generate that resource, they stay in your resource area and they count as generic resources for the rest of the game. The number of resources that you have there is very useful because you can spend the resource points generated by your resource area to recruit new cards. That is, to add new characters to your play area. This is the cost. Simply put, it means that some characters that are particularly powerful will come out later in the game, because unless you have game rules that allow you to break the rules, Thor will not be able to come out on the board before turn 6 if you decided to place cards in your resource area every turn. Remember, you can only play one card in the resource area per turn. So the bigger guns come out later, smaller characters like characters with a cost of 2 come out early. So you start with your decent, not most powerful characters out, and as you're building up your strength gradually, the plot thickens and the bigger, mightier heroes come out. So you can spend your recruit points, or you can spend a number of recruit points up to the number of resources that you have to recruit units during the recruit step, and you can place your units, your new heroes, in the front row or the back row. After that, you can also move your characters from one row to the other, if you so wish. And then you get to the main phase, which is when your characters may attack other characters. Now, usually a character must be in the front row to attack at the front row of the opponent. That is the standard attack. A melee attack from front row to front row. Some characters have this icon here, which is a range attack icon, which simply means that you can attack from the back row. You don't need to be in front. And some characters can fly, as indicated by that area, so they can fly over the front row of the opponent and they can attack characters in the enemy back row. So these are the possible things that allow you to attack from the back or into the back row of the opponent. As I said, characters have an attack and a defense. Attacking is simplicity itself. You declare your attacker, you declare the target, and then players have a chance of playing cards, plot twists, last second effects that may modify the situation, superpowers, plot twists. Once that is done, you will have a final attack and defense value for both characters that are involved in the fight, and then you simply compare the attack of one character with the defense of the other, and simultaneously the attack of the other character with the defense of the attacker. Each time that there is an attack which is equal to or higher than the defense of the opponent, that scores a hit that stuns the opponent. So if I'm attacking with Doctor Strange somebody with a defense of 5 or lower, in any case I'm able to match or exceed the defense of the opponent after all the effects have been played, I stun the opponent. Since combat is simultaneous, you compare attack and defense of both players at the same time. There are 4 possible results. Nobody gets stunned, both get stunned, or the attacker gets stunned and the defender doesn't, or vice versa. If you're stunned, as I said, you flip down the card and you add a wound, unless the card to start with only has a wound, then the card is knocked out. And if you're using range combat, the opponent, of course, can attack you back and use their attack factor against your defense only if the opponent also has a ranged icon on their card. Now, there are characters with some mighty tough defense value that one of your characters alone would have a hard time stunning. So what you can do is to declare combined attack. Simply, characters in the same team, in the same row, can attack in a team an opponent. For example, if they're attacking together, these 2 characters now have a strength of 8. When you're attacking as a team, you simply combine the strength of the characters. The problem is that the opponent, of course, also gets to strike back, and when the opponent strikes back, the opponent simply chooses one, and exactly one of your characters as the target, and applies all of their attack against the defense of your character. Which usually means if you're ganging up against an opponent that is very big and buff, your team will inflict a hit on the opponent, and the opponent will usually inflict a hit and possibly knock out one of your smaller, weaker characters. And here you go. There are a lot of effects that are very situational because they come from specific powers, limitations, and opportunities that individual characters have, but the basic engine is very simple. You basically draw cards, play and commit cards to your resource area, use the resources to recruit new characters, use the characters to attack, alternate doing that until one of the 2 players manages to eliminate the main character of the opponent, and the player is the winner of the game. Now, I had played the new system back in the day, and I did enjoy it. I did enjoy it quite a bit, and I actually even played it with my students of a class that I was teaching at the time about superhero comics. It was fun. If there is something in the old system that I remember occasionally could be, I wouldn't say a problem, but it could make the experience a little underwhelming, was there were times in which it appeared that one of the sides had a hard time catching up with the other. Meaning there were a certain number of games in which one player would be able to bring out quite soon a good number of decent heroes, and that player was able to inflict a lot of damage on the opponent. The opponent was never really able to come back. It wasn't a major problem. I don't even remember if I mentioned it in my old video, because when that happened, you could simply set up the game again and play another game, and most likely things will go better that time. But what I really am happy is that with the new versus system, I don't know exactly how or why, I haven't experienced that. I played a good bunch of games, mixing and matching all the teams, and I pretty much never had that problem. There were moments where a team would be able to gain a certain advantage, and then the other team would be able to kind of like get back on their feet from the initial punch and start punching back. It was a much more tense back and forth. There were many situations in which it felt like both sides were very close to winning for a long time, which of course also means that both sides were very close to losing, because that's what happens when your opponent also is very close to winning. There was that tension that was caused by being constantly close to the point where you think you're finally able to break the defense of the opponent and inflict a major damage, but then the opponent is able to play a plot twist, to play another card, and then the major final blow that you wanted to inflict is either completely prevented, averted, or at least the effects are minimized in such a way that you have to keep playing and try to inflict more blows, and then you're afraid that that one monster that the opponent has, that devastating character that seems unstoppable, you are able to put together a desperate defense, and some of your minor heroes will die fighting against Thanos, fighting against Adam Warlock, but you are able to defend against that. Which is to say, the game has some extremely powerful, scary, powerful characters, but I didn't find any of those being really overpowered in the sense that there was no way of stopping them. This may also be because of the fact that they play with the preset decks that are recommended in the starter set, so I just play with the standard decks. When you're starting to build your own decks, of course, there's the possibility that you have been incredibly smarter than the opponent, you saw an algorithm, you saw a synergy of cards that makes your deck absolutely unbeatable, and I don't know why you would ever want to play it. This is one of the problems for me with the meta games. If I have a weak deck, then I don't have much fun because I don't have much of a chance. If I have a super powerful deck that I studied at home for hours and hours, then I don't have much fun playing the game. We should just be like, we show each other our lists of cards, we have a look, okay, you win, I lose, let's go and get a beer. Or another beverage, doesn't have to be intoxicating. My reviews are family friendly. Maybe it was a root beer. So, with the preset decks, if you are like me and you like just to play a game out of the box without worrying too much about the meta game, you can play a good variety of games here. You have 4 teams that work in vastly different ways, and the ways in which the teams and the characters work really is extremely thematic. I explained the basic mechanics of the game here, but really all the flavor, all of the fun comes from seeing how these pretty basic, straightforward mechanics are there, functional to allow all of the individual differences of the characters to really come alive. And so every character fights in a slightly different way with slightly different abilities. Combos between characters are particularly interesting when you're able to pull them off. All good things. Now, it may be that the first game or two things may feel a little confusing and random because you're not familiar with all the characters and with what they can do, and so there is that fact that you have, like in any game that has many specific individual effects, in which you have the first game or two that will be spent devoting a lot of time reading the text and the captions of the cards and figuring out what those effects actually do, what they mean, and how you can use them to your advantage. There is a lot of that, getting used to the unique effects, and you have to remember what they do. This being said, it's not that you have like 100 characters out there at the same time, so you have to keep track of all these effects. If you do, that's going to happen for a second because you're probably going to win. In most cases, you have anywhere between 2 and 5, 6 characters, and then some will start being knocked out, and new ones will come out. But that is to say that even if though the characters have many effects, there aren't too many of them that you have to keep track of at the same time to make sure that you know exactly how all of the effects are implemented. There is enough such effects to make the game flavorful and thematic, and not too many to make the game too overwhelming, procedural, and mechanical. Again, if you're playing with the standard sets, with the standard decks, I do not know what kind of madness may arise if you build your own crazy decks. But the game definitely can be played in a way that is player-friendly, straightforward, out of the box, without too much pre-gaming, and with all the fun. This is basically the key main idea. The game is good. It has a nice, fun interaction. The back and forth is exciting. The theme is definitely there. It's a good 2-player card game. I played as a 2-player card game. There are options to play with more players, but again, it's completely my personal taste when it comes to these back and forth games. I like to play them as dual games. I like the straightforwardness, everything being channeled towards one objective, defending against that player, fighting against that player. The game allows you to do different things, but that's how I like to play them. That's how I conceive this kind of game, and this game specifically. I played it as a 2-player game only, and I will play it as a 2-player game in the future. Which also means, yes, I will play. It's definitely a fun game. Even if you just get the basic set, there is definitely enough here to keep you entertained and to keep you playing for quite a while. And even if you're playing with the base set and with the standard decks like I did. Because in a single game you will not use all of your decks, so the combination of characters will be different. In some games you will not see a character at all. In certain other games, playing with the same deck, that character that you didn't see before will become a protagonist because it will come out a lot. lot of options, a lot of variety. It's a game that has a pretty good degree of longevity, even just if you're playing with the basic set and with the standard decks. Of course, there will be other sets that will be released in the future. I have no doubt about that. And I'm curious. I'm really curious to see how the system develops. Because as of now, I'm perfectly happy with this purchase from Gen Con 2015. I played it. I will play it in the future. It's a perfectly fine self-contained set. Doesn't feel just like a trap to give you a hint of how the game works, and then you have to spend a lot of money to make it work. If I were never to add any expansion, any further cards, I would already be happy with what I have, with how much I played in the past, and how much I can still play it in the future. Knowing that the system can be expanded and will be expanded is pretty exciting, so I'm curious about that, and I'm really excited to see how it works. So, not a detailed comparison with the first edition, but I can tell you that this second edition of the Versus system is a fun, exciting, fast-moving, very thematic superhero card game, which is good stuff. In conclusion, I want to thank some viewers of my videos that backed my Kickstarter campaign for 2015. In this video, I want to thank 4 of them. I want to thank Jacek Kaufman, James H. Jones, William McGinnis, and Lance A. Hopday. In case I mispronounce their names, here are the names. Thank you to the 4 of you for backing my Kickstarter campaign for 2015, and thank you all my viewers for watching this video.